and welcome to the Executive Room podcast, where we delve deep into the minds of remarkable executives who have shaped the business world with their ideas and actions. I'm your host, Kimberly Afonso, CEO and founder of the KA Consulting Group, and today we have a great guest, Frank Carbajal, who is a true thought leader. I've been following him on LinkedIn for a while now. He's a true advocate for the Latino community. He's the founder and president of Es Tiempo, the visionary behind the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, and the co-author of Latinx Business Success and Building the Latino Future, Success Stories for the Next Generation. So please join me in welcoming Frank to the show. So thank you so much, Frank, for joining us today. Congratulations on the sold out 12th annual Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. I know this has played a significant role in your mission to empower professionals across the community. Could you share some of the insights and transformations that have resulted from this event over the years?
Yeah, well, thank you, Kimberly, and thank you to your audience and everyone listening. I here in the Pacific Standard Time of the Silicon Valley. Good morning to everyone. One of the things that helped shape the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit is, for folks who may not know, Silicon Valley was known as Santa Clara Valley, the Valley of the Hearts, before it was shaped into this motherboard, if you will, of technology and electronics before the tech companies, and motherboard is shaped microchips and things that you'll see. But before that, it was shaped as a salad bowl, literally orchards that were made up of apricots, and many other fruits, cherry trees, and things that we take for granted, that our workers that happen to be Latino, Latina, helped shape the Silicon Valley. And why I say that is because my parents were one of them, and they had the trek of their journey from Imperial Valley, which is in Southern California, and about 25 miles north of Mexicali, the Mexican border, as guest workers during the Bracero program, and a path to citizenship. And during the time that they were working as migrant workers, my dad, who I call a survival networker, was invited to work in these canneries. A cannery is like a step up above the field because you're literally working inside a factory. So my mom and dad both were invited to work in canneries in the Santa Clara Valley, hence the Silicon Valley, and moved us into a barrio. A barrio, for folks who don't know, I don't like saying low income, because I don't like using the term low for the listeners. I like to use the word adverse, tenacious neighborhood. Adverse being that there was some barriers, of course, but my parents, that was an easy challenge for my parents. Being from Mexico and making the trek into the United States, living in a barrio in the United States is something that is often seen negatively, but for me, the experience was positive. It taught me the skills in life. It taught me about tenacity. It taught me about reality. And when I say reality, I learned early on about the inequities of education. And so as I grew into being comfortable under my skin naturally, I felt it was important to create a positive perception of Latinos, Latinas. So I was fortunate to have my first book published by Wiley. A big shout out to Wiley. They are a huge publisher, and never in my lifetime would I think that I would have been published, because Spanish was my first language. But this great country provides us with opportunities to exceed and excel. And so I was able to use my book as a platform to create the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit. And that was born in 2010. And I like to say, Kimberly, I applaud you as being a founder yourself, and you being a founder. Uh, I'm now very glad that we're connected on Instagram, and I see your wonderful photos and things that you have made the journey as a founder to create something that we understand as founders, and everyone that has the founder within them, that you're giving birth to something that you're raising, right? You're raising your business into your own child, and so it's very important to be meticulous, to take care, and to really self-care while you're building your business.
Wow, what a story, Frank, and really inspirational. And it's so clear that your inspirational story through adversity inspired so much in your life. So thanks so much for sharing that with us. Moving to your company, it's called Es Tiempo. For the listeners who speak Spanish, that's a super powerful name. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Why did you pick that name? And more about what the business is doing right now.
Wow, I love the question because it's a thoughtful question, and sometimes folks overlook, the foundational piece of a question, and that really resonates with me because it really digs into how and why I thought of Es Tiempo, which in English is "It's Time," and it was a story that goes back to 1999, going into 2000. The Y2K year, the 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 movement of creating names and URLs, and really honing in on what you feel is important to you. And so in 2001, actually, I had a conversation with two folks, one being my dad, and the other being a colleague who I worked with at the time. Because before I ventured into entrepreneurship, I worked in nonprofit. I worked, in as a social worker. So I really believe in servitude, and so I mentioned to my colleague at the time. I said, "Hey, I had a conversation with my dad, and I really want to start a business." And this is while I'm working at a company, but I think we all have to plant seeds around us in order to really make sure it's organically grown and we go with our company. And so the name I ran by my colleague was, I had this conversation with my dad, and there's two domain names that I'd like to register. And he's like, "What are they?" And I said, first is Isalu, your health, and they're both in Spanish. And the second is Es Tiempo. He's like, "Es Tiempo, like it's time?" I said, "Yes." And I said, I had a conversation with my dad, and I let him know before starting a company, a business, I'd like to write a book. And I've always had a dream of writing a book and sharing our stories across not only the Silicon Valley, but across the country. And I said, and my dad said, "Pues mijo, es tiempo. Son, it's time." And the pastor says, "Go with that." So it was validated by, my dad, who was always my role model, God rest his soul, and a pastor who happened to be a pastor, and the connection was very spiritual, very enlightening. And I just went with Es Tiempo. I registered the domain name, and then in the early 2000s, I created a website through a friend, Jimmy. A shout out to Jimmy Hill for doing so. And then I started to be not only inspired, but to take action in interviewing folks for this first manuscript of my book from 2003, and it was published in 2008. And so the business itself, Kimberly, is something that started off as coaching and then a speakers bureau, and now it's become a business really that is about purpose and passion driven. And so when someone really wants to create a business, make sure it's purpose and passion driven. Because if you're doing it just for money and wealth, then I was given the advice that that will follow you. But you have to really have those two P's: purpose and passion driven.
Completely agree. And as you are so active in the community with your events and your company, what positive things have you seen recently in the Latino community? It could either be in Silicon Valley or across the country. I'd love for us to highlight some of the positive news, especially during times when some of the headlines maybe aren't so great, at certain times about what may be going on. So, any positive things or developments you can share with us?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel that it's positive that we have so many other things, other events going on. Not only the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit, but Latitude that was in Miami. Alpha, which is a big organization. There's ASED, Hispanic Associations for Corporate Responsibility, and two dear friends of mine are in that organization. The first is Carlos Horta, who really believed in my book early on in 2009, invited me to his symposium, and that's now Sid Wilson is the CEO of that organization. And a dear friend of mine, Antonio Tejerino, who's the CEO for the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. They have the greatest awards of the year that happens in early September, and it's shown on PBS in late September. And then there's Claudia Romo, who has We Are All Human, and then she has a gala in December. And locally at Stanford, there's an organization that scales small business owners. It's the Latino Alumni Network that I'm part of at San Jose State, and so many others. So many others. It's just the one at Stanford is LBAN that was founded by a dear friend and mentor of mine, Victor Arias. But the positive is the purpose behind these organizations, and why it is important is to galvanize, bring us together, make sure that we're not only celebrating our success, but really, more importantly, connecting folks to mentors or future mentors, because mentorship is really the key to not only guiding you through the storms of or the barriers of when you start your business, but that affirmation of letting that person know that things aren't easy. We really have to work together to make sure that accomplishments are seen as that word galvanization, coming together.
Totally. It seems like it's all about community. And if any of our listeners want to get involved and, are either of Latino background, heritage, or are passionate about supporting the community, where would you recommend that they start?
It's important to start with, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has so many different groups that I would invite folks to. For example, if they like to connect with me, I have different groups on LinkedIn, like the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Group, and other folks that are thought leaders that are in our community create these LinkedIn groups. And that's a way to start, because it's accessible. You could follow the group. You could participate in terms of questions. And questions are, when you see an event, ask the question, when is the event taking place? How could I participate? And how could I listen? And when you are virtually listening to an event, ask questions like, is there an event that's happening in person in my area? Whether you live in the Silicon Valley, or if you live in Texas or Florida, New York, the Midwest, whichever region, Seattle, whichever region you reside, it's important to really reach out. And when I say reach out, make sure that you also ask the question to that thought leader, how can I have a phone call with you? Just like we're doing today, Kimberly. I remember gosh, it was the beginning of COVID. We were going to have this, and now I'm glad that I never say post COVID because we don't know what happens, right? But I'm glad that we're having this space right now.
Totally. And this podcast is all about vocal leadership, Frank. That's why I was really excited to invite you on because I think you're the star of that. You're amazing at using your LinkedIn. You're amazing at promoting so much good, so many of your events, and all of the things that you're doing. So, if you could give advice to our audience, other executives, CEOs, founders, who want to get started, who aren't yet thought leaders, what would you advise them to do to start having a better presence?
There's two things. The two things is, I really believe in humility. I know being bold is a great attribute and it's a great trait to have, but it's also important to be humble and really understand that when you are creating a business, it really is about servant leadership. And what I mean by that is helping others along the way. And I feel that my business could not have happened and executed without mentors and folks that really have become like executive sponsors. And what I mean by that is when you shape and create a mission, it's important to really understand the difference between whether you're a nonprofit or you're a private organization, or if you are a person that feels that you have a business model and you have a deck and you want to pitch it to a venture capitalist or an angel investor. I advise folks not to feel desperate, not to feel the need to take up that person's time. If you could gauge that that person that you're going to ask seems to be super busy, then take your time to build a relationship with that person. Before asking the big ask, if you're seeking venture capital funding or angel investment for your small business, the most important thing is build a relationship versus asking for money right away, because relationships are built on trust. That's for the private. For nonprofit, it's important to really look at foundations. The ecosystem for nonprofits is huge, and so it's very competitive. And if you're, for example, a nonprofit that's designed and geared towards STEM or STEAM, then really understand your ecosystem. Understand the nonprofits around you and build relationships with those nonprofits. And that's where humility comes in. Be humble to ask questions and guidance. Do never think you know it all, because we do not know it all. We need teamwork in that area as well. And then if you are a person working in the space of public, like if you're a servant leader, you're working in the political realm, it's very important to be authentic. In all of these, it's authenticity is key. But in terms of policy and in terms of public servitude, it's really important to show, transparency. And for those three areas of professionalism, with the fourth, education. Education is really something that's close to my heart. I sit on the advocacy committee for the Eastside Alliance, which is through the Silicon Valley Education Foundation. So education, for example, is one of the areas in most important area of the Latina area of excellence in terms of achieving greatness. You really have to connect with many mentors along the way. So those four areas in terms of professionalism are the nuggets that I provide as far as insight and input. And I'm open Kimberly, to any of your audience members to connect with me as well if they have direct questions.
I'll definitely be linking your profile, Frank. I think you're a great example of what you said as well about authenticity, transparency. I think anyone looking at your LinkedIn or doing a Google search about you, you really can pick up who you are as a person, which is really important. We haven't met in person, but I imagine your online persona and your in-person persona are really similar just from everything I've seen from you online. So, as you are so good at using your LinkedIn, how do you go about it? Do you just think of an idea and post about it? Do you have a system that you use to create your content? And also, what benefits has having an active profile made for your business?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. I'll start with something that was more recent in terms of 3 years ago when we were at the scary point of COVID. During the Hispanic Heritage Month, we saw everything, of course, virtually, and the Hispanic Heritage Month was the most interesting because from September 15th to October 15th, everything that happened to do with a conference or an event was online, was virtual, and many activities were happening on posts and comments on a person's profile. And what I observed was that outside of October 15th, on October 16th, it inspired me to look at creating a hashtag of 365 Latino leader, 365 Latina leader, and identify a leader of the day and post that story of that person. And for folks listening, we all have that hashtag power, superpower within us. So that is part of your brand that I feel is natural and organic. And so that was something that happened 3 years ago for me. And how I leveraged it, Kimberly, was to make sure that it was consistent, because we knew that once we were out of the storm of COVID and things were going to happen again in person, that folks were excited and ignited to see some of their 365 Latina leaders or Latino leaders in the same room. And hence, the Silicon Valley Latino Leadership Summit reopened again last year in 2022. And I feel that whatever we do in business and whichever business model that we believe in, make sure that you're consistent and your message is consistent. Just like your Kimberly, like your message is consistent to where Riverside. It really has to be something that you feel in your heart that you're not gonna sway away from. You're going to move, forward with, and it has to be on a consistent basis.
Very well said. And so, as we wrap up, Frank, we always love to end with a more fun personal question. And someone on our team from Mexico wanted us to ask this one, which I thought was funny. If you had to pick one, American football or football, which would you pick to support?
Oh man. Oh my goodness, that is a difficult question. Oh, wow. Well, I'm a diehard 49er fan and a diehard Mexico El Tri fan, but there's a football right up there. You see that
Yeah,
football? It's
yeah.
right behind me. So if I were to say the rounded ball, which helped me, through life, football helped me through life because that was a passion of my grandfather and my dad. But to save me, and I have to show what's right next to me, the 49ers.
Oh, amazing.
So I have to go with the NFL. I just have to because I'm a huge, 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 as you know, Kimberly, diehard Niner fan. So the person who asked from Mexico, I love the question, but if I have to end it off with this, if Mexico wouldn't break our hearts so much and win at least one World Cup, then it would have probably been football. But since the 49ers have won 5 Super Bowls, it has to be football because we all love being part of a champion, right? And it's just Mexico, please, por favor, as we say, in 2026, let's shock the world.
Very well said, Frank. It wasn't an easy question.
Oh,
I
that
think
was
I'm
tough.
the opposite of you, as now as I live in Europe, I think I'm more on the football side, but when I'm in the US, I would have to pick American football. So it's not an easy one.
Ah,
Uh,
let me ask you this quick question before we. So you're in Portugal, Portugal?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So are you a big Ronaldo fan?
Yes, I am, but he's controversial, as you know, so not everyone is, but I think he's the best of Portugal. So I
He's
am.
the best, and I just want to add something. He really helps a lot of kids, and I have a daughter who's disabled, my middle daughter. So Ronaldo, who people who don't know, he has a big heart, big corazón.
Yeah, he does, and I admire him because he's a really hard worker. I think he works really, really hard, so that's really admirable. And didn't know that about how much he gave back to kids, something that I'll look into myself. Um, well, thank you so much, Frank. It was great to have you on the show. Great insights. I'll be linking for everyone to connect with you, follow you, and thank you. Until next time.